I've been working the night shift for the sheriff's department in Bergen County for 2 years now. It's not exactly what you'd call an action-packed job. Northeastern Bergen County isn't known for high crime rates. Most nights, my work revolves around traffic stops, the occasional late-night drug bust, and maybe a robbery or two. Sure, there are domestic disputes and the rare assault call, but nothing too out of the ordinary. That is, until one night. A night that would shake me to my core. It started like any other. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio just after midnight. Disturbance reported. Neighbor heard a scream. Investigate the residence at 324 Hillcrest Avenue. At first, I wasn't overly concerned. Screams could mean anything: a domestic argument, a prank gone wrong, or even just a loud TV. But as I turned onto Hillcrest Avenue, something about the quiet street set me on edge. The houses here were spaced out, large and dark, shrouded in the stillness of the late hour. When I pulled up to the house in question, I double-checked the address. 324. The right house. But all the lights were off, and the curtains were drawn tightly shut. A blue Toyota Sienna minivan sat in the driveway. Someone was home. I got out of my cruiser, the crunch of gravel under my boots breaking the eerie silence. As I approached the house, a man stepped out from the shadows of the neighboring property. He waved me over, his expression tight with concern. "I'm the one who called," he said, his voice hushed but urgent. I heard a scream, loud, blood-curdling. It sounded like it came from the house. I nodded, keeping my flashlight trained on the house. "Do you know who lives here?" "A woman," he replied. "She lives alone most of the time, but sometimes her boyfriend comes over. I haven't seen him in a while, though." That piece of information sent a ripple of unease through me. I thanked the man and turned back to the house. I knocked on the front door. Nothing. I knocked again, harder this time, my fist echoing against the wood. Still no response. I tried the doorknob. Locked. I stepped back, scanning the house. The windows on the ground floor were all closed tight except one. A window at the back of the house was slid open, just enough for someone to climb through. My pulse quickened. This was no coincidence. I called for backup, reporting the open window and the scream. Dispatch confirmed a unit was on the way, but it would take at least 10 minutes for them to arrive. I didn't have 10 minutes. Climbing through the window wasn't easy with all my gear, but I managed to hoist myself into what looked like the kitchen. The house was silent, the kind of silence that presses on your ears and makes every sound seem amplified. I started turning on lights as I moved through the house, each click of the switch illuminating more of the eerie, abandoned feeling space. The living room was empty, the furniture neat and undisturbed. "Hello," I called out. "Sheriff's Department. Is anyone here?" No response. I called out again, louder this time, but the house swallowed my voice. The first floor was clear. That left the upstairs. I hesitated at the base of the staircase. Something about the narrow, carpeted stairs leading into darkness made my skin crawl. I considered waiting for backup. But what if someone was hurt? What if time was running out? I unholstered my weapon, unlocked the front door for my backup, and began my ascent. The stairs creaked under my weight, each step echoing in the silence. At the top, I found a narrow hallway with 4 doors. I flipped the hall light on, the dim glow casting long shadows. "Sheriff's Department," I called out again. A creak, faint but unmistakable. It came from behind the 3rd door on the right. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding so loudly I could feel it in my throat. I pushed the door open with one hand, my flashlight sweeping the room. It was a bedroom. The light from the hallway spilled in, enough to show a figure lying in bed under the covers. A woman. Her back was to me, her body eerily still. "Ma'am?" I said, stepping closer. Something wasn't right. The covers were dark and wet, soaked through with a liquid that glistened in the faint light. Blood. I yanked the covers back, revealing a horrific scene. The woman had been stabbed multiple times, her chest and abdomen a patchwork of deep, bleeding wounds. Her skin was pale, her breathing shallow and ragged. Grabbing my radio, I called in the stabbing, urgently requesting an ambulance and backup. My voice shook as I relayed the details. As I waited for a response, a thought struck me. The creek. If she was here, unconscious and bleeding, who or what had made that noise? I scanned the room, my eyes darting to every corner, every shadow. My flashlight landed on the closet door. My instincts screamed at me. Slowly, I approached the closet, my gun drawn. I placed my hand on the doorknob, pausing for a moment to steady my nerves. Then I yanked it open. Nothing, just an empty closet. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Something wasn't adding up. I turned back to the bed, to the woman lying there, and a horrible realization hit me. The bed. Dropping to my knees, I lifted the bed skirt, shining my flashlight underneath. And there he was. A man, lying on his stomach, staring back at me with wide, unblinking eyes. A black face mask covered the lower half of his face, but I could see the twisted smirk in his eyes. "Show me your hands," I shouted, my voice trembling. Slowly, he raised his hands, his movements deliberate. I stood, backing up as I ordered him to crawl out from under the bed. He slid out, inch by inch, until he was kneeling before me. "Stand up," I barked. "Hands where I can see them," he complied, standing in the corner of the room with his hands raised. My gun never wavered as I kept it trained on him. Backup arrived minutes later, their footsteps pounding up the stairs. I called out, letting them know where I was. Only then did I holster my weapon and handcuff the man. The paramedics arrived shortly after and rushed the woman to the hospital. Miraculously, she survived. Despite 6 stab wounds, she pulled through. As for the man, he was her boyfriend. During questioning, he confessed to everything. He'd found out she had cheated on him with one of his friends. When he called her about it, she broke up with him over the phone. That was the trigger. He snapped. I still think about that night. About how close she came to losing her life. About the look in his eyes when I found him under the bed. It's a reminder of how quickly the mundane can turn into the unthinkable. The hidden door, Mike and Steve had seen their fair share of strange cases in their years on the force. Yet, something about the call from Adam's apartment felt off even before they arrived. Adam, a nervous man in his late 20s, had been making repeated calls about strange occurrences in his home, sounds in the walls, faucets turning on by themselves, and shadows moving where none should exist. When Mike and Steve stepped into the small, dimly lit apartment, the air felt heavy, almost oppressive. Adam was pacing nervously in the living room, his hands wringing together. "They're here," Adam stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can feel them. They're still here." Mike exchanged a glance with Steve, both officers quietly questioning the man's mental state. But as seasoned cops, they knew better than to dismiss anything outright. "Stay here," Mike instructed. "We're going to take a look around." The apartment was eerily quiet as they moved from room to room, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until they reached the far corner of the living room. Mike's flashlight caught an unusual line etched into the wall, faint but deliberate. The more he stared at it, the more it took shape in his mind: a door. or rather, the outline of one, carved crudely into the drywall. It didn't belong, and the realization sent a chill creeping up his spine. "Steve," Mike called, his voice low and tense. Steve joined him, his brows furrowing as he examined the strange outline. "What the hell is this?" Before Mike could respond, Adam's voice trembled from the other room. "They're in the walls. They're in the walls." Suddenly, Steve's radio crackled to life, startling them both. The dispatcher's voice came through, reminding them they were alone with a potentially unstable individual. But then Steve froze, his hand instinctively reaching for his gun. "Mike, you'd better come with me. Now." Mike followed Steve into the bedroom, where Steve's gun was trained on another section of the wall. His face was pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. "There's something behind here," Steve said. His voice, usually calm and commanding, now held an edge of fear. The two officers approached the wall cautiously, guns raised. Behind them, Adam's cries grew louder, almost frantic. "Stay back, Adam," Mike shouted over his shoulder, but his focus remained on the wall. Steve hesitated only for a moment before reaching out to tug at a loose panel. With a sharp crack, a piece of the wall gave way, revealing a hollow space behind it. Mike's breath caught in his throat as 3 pairs of eyes stared back at them from the darkness. 3 people, 2 men and a woman, were crammed into the narrow cavity, their bodies pressed together like sardines in a can. Their faces were painted with bizarre, tribal-like patterns, their expressions eerily neutral. "What the hell?" Steve muttered, his voice trailing off. Mike found his voice first, his training kicking in. "Out. Now." The 3 figures moved slowly, almost mechanically, as they climbed out of the wall. They didn't resist as Mike and Steve handcuffed them, but their silence was unnerving. They didn't speak, didn't struggle, just stared ahead with blank expressions. By the time backup arrived, the apartment was a hive of activity. Other officers escorted a trembling Adam out of the building, while Mike and Steve led the 3 suspects downstairs. The eerie calm of the suspects left both men deeply unsettled. As they handed the trio off to the officers transporting them to jail, Steve leaned close to Mike. "What the hell were they doing in the walls?" Mike shook his head, his stomach churning. "I don't know, but I've got a bad feeling about this." The revelation weeks passed, and the case seemed to fade into the background. Then, a report landed on Mike's desk that dredged everything back up. The 3 suspects were part of a cult operating out in the woods, known for targeting vulnerable individuals. Adam had been their latest target. With a history of mental instability, he was the perfect prey for their twisted games. They had infiltrated his home, hiding within the walls to torment him, whispering to him at night and manipulating his fears. The painted faces, the silence, the bizarre behavior, it was all part of their ritual to break him down and recruit him into their ranks. Mike read the report with growing unease. "They were trying to scare him into submission," he murmured. Steve leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. And turning on all the faucets, that was Adam trying to flush them out. He wasn't crazy. He was desperate. The revelation hit hard. What they had dismissed as the ramblings of an unstable man was a genuine cry for help. The creepy woman at the door, another call came in weeks later that would rival the eerie encounter with the cultists. It started innocuously enough, a report of a suspicious person going door to door late at night. The man who called in was visibly shaken when Mike arrived. "She's not right," the man stammered. "Kept saying she needs blood." The homeowner showed Mike footage from his Ring doorbell. The woman, middle-aged with wiry hair, stared into the camera for several minutes, her lips moving silently before pressing the button. "Open the door," she crooned. "I need blood." Her smile was grotesque, her laugh hollow and grating. When the homeowner refused, she began clawing at the door, her fingers scrabbling against the frame like an animal trying to burrow inside. The footage sent a chill down Mike's spine. "Where did she go?" "Next door," the man replied. Mike called for backup, and soon several units were combing the area. The woman had vanished, leaving an eerie silence in her wake. But then, a new call came through. Someone had broken into a nearby house. Mike and another officer arrived at the scene, their guns drawn as they entered the darkened home. The front door was ajar, swinging slightly in the night breeze. "Police!" Mike called out. "If you're in here, come out with your hands up." A faint, high-pitched cackle answered him, sending a shiver down his spine. The couple who lived there was barricaded in their bedroom upstairs, too terrified to move. "She's still here," the husband whispered through the crack in the door. "She's not normal." The officers cleared the upstairs rooms methodically, their flashlights slicing through the darkness. When they reached the last room, the laughter grew louder. Mike flicked on the light. The woman was sitting cross-legged on the bed, cradling a blood-stained doll. Her left wrist was slashed, the blood soaking into the sheets. In her right hand, she held a large knife. Her gaze locked onto Mike, and her lips curled into a smile. "I need blood," she whispered. Mike's voice was steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "Put the knife down." She tilted her head, the smile never faltering. "She needs blood," she repeated, stroking the doll's matted hair. "Who's she?" Mike pressed, trying to keep her talking. The woman's eyes gleamed with a manic light. "You'll see," she giggled. Without warning, she lunged at Mike, the knife raised high. His training took over. 2 shots rang out, the sound deafening in the confined space. The woman crumpled to the floor, clutching her arm and wailing in pain. The officers quickly subdued her, securing the knife and calling for an ambulance. Aftermath: the woman was later deemed mentally unfit to stand trial. She was committed to a psychiatric facility, where she remains to this day. For Mike, the memory of her haunting smile and the chilling echo of her laughter linger. It was a reminder of the unpredictable and often terrifying nature of his work. From the cultists in the walls to the deranged woman at the door, these cases left a permanent mark on him, a testament to the darkness lurking in the most unexpected places.